So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the track Saving Flowers by Salute. This is very much like a modern day garage crossover with like house music. And as always, I've remade the track and we're going to go through the key elements in the song and just talk about why it's such a good track and it's so catchy. So I'm just going to start by playing the recreation for you. Everything has been made from scratch apart from the vocals and some of the sound effects that are part of the vocal stem splitting that I did before. And I'll start from a little bit in the track. And I mainly focused on this first section of the song and a little bit of the breakdown because obviously there's a big change. So just some of the general features about the song. It's 132 beats per minute, which is in that garage territory. It's maybe not as fast as some of the other ones like the 140s that we've been looking at in the past. The key of the track is D flat major, which is one of the first major keys that we've come across. It's very interesting to see because a lot of dance music is generally written in a minor key, that darker feel. But we will talk a little bit about how it could be seen as being in a minor key at points and how it provides that dancey feel. In terms of the structure of the song, we've got these big 8-bar sections where the bass alternates between two different patterns and two different bass notes in particular. But then we also have bigger 16-bar sections where we add new elements in. So in the beginning here, we've got 8 bars, that creates that 16-bar section where you can see the bass changes here from the first 8 bars to the second. And then after that 16 bars is when the sample comes in, and that's this crossover point here. Another 8 bars and we get that detuned lead that comes in and out in those 8-bar sections too. And then after another 16, we get the main vocal then coming in after that section, but pretty straightforward apart from that. Again, in the breakdown here, we've got a big 16-bar section, and then the second 16 bars just leading up to the second drop are more of like a build-up than the breakdown. And the first thing we need to talk about in the song here is the sample. So this main sound here, used pretty much throughout the whole song, is a sample. It's called Asaic. It's very likely that I'm pronouncing that completely wrong, so let me know in the comments if I have done. And it's also by a group called Cassiopeia or Cassiopeia, which again, my apologies if I'm completely butchering that. And the track is this very jazzy, swingy, lot of guitars. It's mainly like a guitar solo piece generally. And let's just have a listen to the beginning, because this is where the sample lies at the beginning of the song. And when I was looking for this song on YouTube, there were like 4 different versions that I could find, and they were all completely different in terms of their mix, instruments, even some patterns and rhythms as well. This is the one I ended up at, but I'll show you the others as well in a minute. And this is what it sounds like at the beginning of that song where the sample lies. And there are a few other versions of this, and it was quite a difficult one. I couldn't pinpoint exactly which version was used. I got very close to it sounding like the original sample, but it is still slightly different. So if any of you know the exact sample where it was taken from, let me know in the comments too. The way to make the sample, I'm going to take a section of this song, and I find this to be the easiest way to get your samples perfectly in time with your project. The way we go about doing this is I'm going to go into my audio file. I'm just going to zoom in and make sure that there is no noticeable gap at the beginning here. So I'm going to get rid of this up to just about where the waveform starts to move like this. So about there's all right. And I'm going to line this up with the nearest bar. So that's bar 17. I'm now going to play the track. I'm just going to listen and count the beats of the song. I'm going to count out a bar, 2 bars or 4 bars. I generally recommend doing 2 bars, and I'll count along with it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And on that 5th beat, which is the start of the 2nd bar, you want to press pause, and you should see in the waveform, there'll be a big jump in the waveform, whether it's a kick drum or something similar. And let's just make sure it's this here. Yeah, and what you want to do is zoom in, and I'm going to split this audio file in Ableton with Command and E, and then I'm just going to drag the end of the clip so it starts at pretty much the same point as we picked at the beginning. So you can see the end of this audio file goes up to here. I can then delete everything else. And if you're trying to get a whole song in time as well, this works in exactly the same way. You can just delete the second half in Ableton. And now what we've basically done is we've cut out a 2-bar loop from the tempo of the original song. So this clip here is 2 bars at a certain tempo. And if you look on our timeline, you can see Ableton is saying that this is 2 bars in length. And you can see the difference there is the difference in the 2 tempos. And all we have to do, I'm going to double click on my clip, turn warp on, and then I'm going to go to the top right hand corner of my clip. But before I do anything, I'm going to hold down the shift key. That little arrow will appear, and I'm just going to stretch that so it then matches with the 2 bars in our project like this. So now our 2 bars of our sample fit within the 2 bars of our project. If we press play, turn the metronome on, you can hear now the sample is pretty much in time. You may need to do a few slight adjustments depending on the sample that you picked, if it's a real recording. But if you're using a long sample, like a full track, once you've done this, you can just then extend the audio file back out like so. And this will now be in time for the rest of the song, as long as the timing of the sample is accurate. And from here, it's quite simple to recreate this sample. So we have the first bit at the beginning. And all that they've done is they've taken this next beat here, so from beats 2 to 3, and just duplicated that over and over again. So the rest of the 2 bars. Now you can hear again in this sample, there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's a lot of drums. In some of the other songs, there weren't as many drums. The other thing that we could do, which worked quite well with this sample, instead of taking the second beat here, we can actually split from beats 3 to 4 and use that instead. As you can hear, there's kind of the tail end of the snare. The one thing we need to do before we do any of that, I'm going to just go back. I'm just going to pitch the sample down by 3 semitones. And let's just repeat that process again. Let me solo the bass. Add a little bit of sidechain compression. I'm using LFO tool here. And there you go. I'm sure there might have been a slightly different way. They might have used slicing inside of Simpler to do this. There might have been another way that they created this sample. And again, it might be from a different sample itself. This is the original. I'm just going to mute this. I've got my group here with the finished sample in. And all I did is I took that sample that we were just listening to then, I split the stems out in Logic and then just took the musical elements and just did a slight bit of rearranging because some parts need a little bit of fading in. And from those kind of two original beats we were talking about where we ended up picking the second one, I actually ended up taking the end part from the first beat and putting it in there too, which is pretty close. Just to show you some of the other attempts, because I did spend a lot of time trying to get this perfect. But so that sample was from 2008, the Asian Dreamer album, I believe. This sample in here was from Super Flight. This is the first one that I tried out. Now the processing slightly changed since I first made this because it's suiting the other track more, but it has that kind of similar quality to the actual track, but it just sounded too much like a guitar, whereas the sound in the song sounds a little bit more like a synthesizer. And again, here's another example. This is from another album from 2002. I can't actually remember the name of this album, but there are loads of different versions out there and I have no idea why. But I ended up on this because it had a similar tone, I thought, to the final sample. Now let's talk about the next biggest feature of this song, and it is swing. We talked a little about swing before on the channel. In UK Garage especially, there is a lot of swing used to create that really funky, groovy drum beat. And it's not just using the drum beat, it's using the bass. We actually use it in the sample as well. If we look at our drums here, and again, this is a glitch in Ableton thanks to me grouping some of the drums, but you can see our drums. And I've got them set to swing here, 16th notes, 64, which is pretty high. At the moment, you can't actually see what's going on with the drum notes here. But if I commit this groove just so we can see what's happening, you'll see that these notes here, which land on the second and the fourth 16th notes within each beat, are going to be shuffled just over to the right slightly. And this is it without groove. Quite a big difference, as you can hear. We've also got some groove on the shakers too. We've got groove inside the bass clip here. You can see swing Logic 16th notes have been applied to this. And the bass really emphasizes the swing because a lot of the notes in the bass land on these second and fourth 16th notes. You see there's one there, one here, one there too. And if we commit this groove to this, you'll see them all shuffle like that. If I just turn timing off on my groove here, you'll hear what a massive impact it actually has on the song. So very, very important. If we go down and look at our sample as well, you'll also see that there is some swing applied to this. It's swing from the original sample though. The swing of the actual performance is built into this. This is a beat here. I set my grid to 16th notes. You'll see this is the first one, second, third, and fourth. And you can see these two funky guitar hits. Those two kind of strums there you can see are on the second and fourth 16th notes, and you can see they don't start exactly at the beginning of that 16th note again because we need to apply the same groove to all of the parts within our song. So moving on to the key of our track, and as you can see in the top here, the global scale that I've got set is D flat major or C sharp major. And when we talk about the major key, we're really talking about this bass line here. You can see that lower note that we rest on here on our bass is our C sharp, the root of our scale. But the interesting thing about this bass line, of course, is how it jumps back and forth between this and this. And I really, really like this. I think it's such a great element to the song. To break it down a little bit more, if we look at the bass here, the bass jumps between the fifth note in the scale, the G sharp, and the C. So it starts on the 5th, we land on the root note there. In like classical music, this can be seen as a cadence as well, a perfect cadence. I think it's a perfect cadence, where you go from the 5th note, 5th chord, to the 1st chord at the end of the piece, and it just gives this nice resolve to the whole track. And then when we jump into the second half, we move up to the 4th note, the F sharp, and it does provide this nice tension to the track. Most of the other instruments in the song, like that sample, just stay exactly where they are. So when this bass changes, it completely reharmonizes the sample and gives us this whole new meaning. And the interesting thing about this bass line is that this F sharp here is the 4th note in our major scale. But if we were to look at the relative minor scale of C sharp major, it would be A sharp up here. They both share exactly the same notes, and a minor scale is essentially a mode of a major scale like Lydian and Dorian, things like this. And so if we were to look at this in terms of A sharp minor, that would be our root note here, and you can see the bass line starts on that F sharp, which is 2 steps below, which again, we have seen a lot of in the past few analysis, like in the Fred Again song 10, in the Sub Focus track that we did go back as well. Very, very common trick to use, and that's what's creating that nice tension, as you'll see in a minute when we talk about the detuned lead. And this section gives the track that minor feel, that more tense feel that gets then released by the major section afterwards. So talking about the detuned lead, there are 2 different parts within this detune lead. It starts here leading into that kind of more tense minor section on the right. And again, if you're going to listen to the track at this point only and just loop this section here, you would probably think that the song is in A sharp minor. If we look at our detune lead, you can see it jumps back and forth between the A sharp and what would be the 5th note in that minor scale. The bass underneath all of that would be on this F sharp here. So you can see the detune lead relative to the bass is going between the 3rd and the 7th note. Nothing too crazy rhythmically going on. We've got this little change here just leading into the next 2 bars. And then after the minor section, we go into this more spread lead. Pretty much the same pattern, just without that end section. We go from G sharp up to G sharp, just the octaves and the root notes of the bass below. The same goes for these pad chords in the breakdown as well. There's nothing too fancy going on here. Let's just have a listen. We just have this pattern that goes between our F sharp, which is that 4th note in the scale, the more minor feeling section in the song, and then the C sharp down here, which of course is our root note. The chords in here are known as 7th chords because they have the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th notes in them. And again, when you listen to this in the song, it's just a nice release from the kind of intense section before. And then later on, when we're building back up to the drop, we do get this additional stationary note, this drone G sharp. Which is always a little bit confusing because it'd be called like the 9th note within our scale, even though there are only 7 notes in total. This is the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th. This would technically be the 8th. So even though that's the 1st note, again, the F sharp, as you can see, you just kind of continue on up. So that'd be the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, so on and so forth. So this is a 9th chord here. And that's also the chord that ties us back into the main drop on the right too. And that's it really in terms of the compositional elements overall it's a relatively simple track, but this is a very interesting technique, having these two big sections in your song, and I think this is what keeps the track going, keeps the energy up. The sample, of course, as well, is a massive part of this song. Jumping between that major section and that darker minor section just gives the track so much more energy. And then of course we have the vocals too.